Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we've only got a minute left in the house. Less than a minute.
That should be done by the.
It's missing from here.
Right, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Our first meeting of 2026. We respect and recognize the First Nations within whose traditional lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Ktunaxa, Snipes, and Silks people, and the Indigenous and Métis residents of our community. So happy New Year, everyone, and welcome members of the public and staff and council to our first meeting of 2026. It was a good reminder when I heard the cell phone ringing. If anybody has their cell phone with them, if they could please put it on mute for the duration of the meeting, that would be great. And also, if we've got a lot of business tonight, so around 7:30, depending where we're at in the agenda, we might take a brief recess so people can stretch their legs and use the washroom. All right, we'll move into adoption of the agenda. Recommendation is that the agenda for the January 14, 2026 regular council meeting be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Brown. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And just so you know, Councillor Lang is unable to join us this evening. And then the minutes of the December 9th, 2025 meeting. Recommendation is that if there are no errors or omissions, that the December 9th regular council meeting minutes be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. If members online could please mute themselves, that would be perfect. Thank you. All right, then we'll move into information items. So I've provided a written report. I'm happy to answer any questions that council has regarding items in there. Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, for the, open, make sure I say it right, Community Sustainable Living Advisory Committee. In your report, it says the Village of Kaslo should carefully consider whether they wish to continue to be part of the service. As council, what information do you need to make an informed decision? Are we seeing value for residents in relation to the amount of taxation? So I guess what I'm wondering is, and not to sound like I don't think that there's value, but specifically what value has this committee brought to the Village of Kaslo? I just want to know the amount we've spent to date and the deliverables for that money in order to determine if we should give notice or not. Like that way I can actually have all of the specifics to see what actual value we're getting before making a decision as to whether we would kind of want to signal that or not.
Yeah. Well, what I would suggest is that we invite one of the RDCK staff members who is involved with that committee, and they can outline what the projects are that have been funded through that service. We've been a participant since it was reinstituted. I can't remember exactly when it was. I think around 2014, 15. And it's just, I'm suggesting we look at it because there have been 4 notices of withdrawal. So within 2 years' time, our requisition is going to be more than double what it is now. So it's around $6,000 right now. So it's going to, I think, go up to around 13 to 14,000. So that's why I wanted to raise it for council to think about. There's enough time, and there is that for us to get information that we should all consider. I sit at the table, but I don't want it to be just on my opinion. This isn't something that's that time sensitive that I get to the table and I have to say right now, yes, we're going to withdraw. It's a formal process that has to be gone through. So staff would have to reach out to our regional district staff and go through the process. And there's a 2-year notice period for withdrawal. So anybody who's given notice in December, it's 2 years from now that that's effective. So, yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair. And in general, with such a large amount of communities pulling out,
Mhm.
what tends to be the main reason that they're just not finding the value there for the amount of money put in?
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess that's why, especially if we might have to double what we're putting in, I'd love to actually see concrete numbers to know that that return of investment is coming back to us.
I can certainly send you a copy of the last staff report. I think I did highlight that in my report, that I could provide a copy
Beautiful.
to council members if they wished.
Yes, please.
So if you could send me an email, do other council members want that? Okay, and then, because we've missed the deadline for a 2027 end, it would be not effective until 2028, I believe.
Okay.
All right, you're welcome. And any other questions? Right, and then so just a few other notes. I've included wording in my report from the resolutions from RDCK meetings, and they're not considered final until adopted at the board meeting, which will be next week. And also, as you can see in my report, there was a successful fundraiser for the new library fund, which was held just before Christmas. And so watch for additional fundraisers in the future. Upcoming this Saturday, there's a celebration being held in honor of Eva Kellerman, who retired as library director after 20 years of service to the library. So that will be this Sunday at Heritage Hall. Today I attended the CBP Housing Initiatives Task Force meeting, which I'm the CBP board liaison for. And I encourage people to access the resources that are available online, including webinars on housing. And these can be accessed by typing housing webinars in their search bar. There's some good information on there. And applications for the Ready Grant program through the RDCK are now being accepted with an application deadline of February 20th. And just for information's sake, for other not-for-profits, there is a link to the non-trust grant directory on the grants and programs directory page through there. So next week is RDCK meetings. They're not yet publicized, so I don't know what's on their agendas, and that will be followed by CBT meetings in Fairmont next Friday and Saturday. And just wanted to share with members of the public that the reason tonight's council meeting was rescheduled is because we had a meeting with Minister of State Brittany Anderson last night, and with our topics of discussion being affordable and supportive housing, and mentioning that we need support for funding for expansion of the wastewater treatment plant and the system in Lower Kaslo to facilitate densification of housing, as well as climate adaptation and emergency preparedness. And we also talked about healthcare and long-term care. So funding for long-term care beds and for programs for people aging at home. So now, if there are any council member reports. So, Councillor Leakwood.
Through the chair, just a heads up that we are planning another, the Hospital Society is planning another Heritage Tea for Heritage Week.
Okay.
And we'll try and do some other events during that week, which is February 17th to the 22nd.
Thank you. All right, so And we had no committee meeting minutes. We had a committee meeting this week, but that wasn't before the deadline for submission for this agenda. So now we'll go to the CAO's report.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Just a few items for council. One is one you probably already know, the Council Remuneration Task Force has completed their review and given a final report. So that's available for public inspection and feedback will be gathered. And council will be asked to provide direction to staff at a future council meeting. So what do we do with the recommendations from the final report? What do you do with any feedback you receive from the public? Maybe you have your own thoughts and ideas. And then let staff know what to do with any bylaw amendments that you might like. And staff would then take action, and the intention would be for any changes to come into effect for the next council term. Good news for staffing. Our municipal services clerk position has been filled, and we have someone starting next Monday, January 19th. So that would effectively fill the vacancy from our legislative assistant. So different job name, but similar duties. And South Kaslo Development Plan. Public feedback on the final report was received all the way through January 9th, which I believe was Friday, and it's being reviewed by staff and our consultant. Presentation on the final report will be made to council at your next meeting. That's it. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Leithwood.
To the chair. Once we get the final report from the consultant, does that mean that we can still take input? Because there has been some concern that it wasn't a long enough timeline for input. But like, even though we might get a final report, it's a plan, right? So it's an ongoing sort of project.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd say you'll receive the final report, and typically council would adopt the plan. So now you've got it. It doesn't mean you're going to follow the plan. It simply means this is the idea and it's all good. So certainly the public can continue to provide input that would shape what actually happens, if that's kind of the direction you wanted to go. Continue to receive input, and then it'll help mold what ultimately we do, what kind of agreements we make with developers, or what kind of land does the village sell, or do we develop it ourselves? All that stuff is still has to be worked out, notwithstanding the fact that there's this plan.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for CEO? Right. So then staff reports. So we've got staff report on compliance with Bill 44. Ian is our manager of strategic. It isn't here to answer questions, but it was a very informative report. Even without Kaslo South, we could possibly meet those housing targets with the vacant lands that we do have that are could be available for construction. So I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
And then the circulation package, which includes some general information items and information submitted by members of the public. So thank you for taking the time to do that. So that brings us to question period. Are there any questions from members of the public? Don't, yeah. If you're online and you have a question, you can unmute and ask your question. Yeah, I can see a bill. I'm just going online first, so I don't see anyone online. So in the room, go ahead.
You need to get up there.
No, you don't have to.
I'm really quite, two, well, that's the first one. In the circulation package, there's a letter from Ann Melick about the procedures that I was wondering if you will be discussing tonight before you move on approving the procedures changes.
Well, her input has been received. Just because it's an information item, it doesn't mean that, well, council has read it. So I suspect that many of the things that she's raised will be discussed. And the procedures bylaw isn't for adoption tonight. We're just discussing it. CEO is going to go over the he's going to go over the input that's been received from council as well. So it's for discussion tonight, not for adoption or recommendation. Okay, and did you have another question?
And the other one was related, sort of related to what Councilor Leaford had to say about the process for the South Kaslo plan. And I was very concerned to see what the concept has as the first phase as being, because in my mind, that's the most complex phase. And why you wouldn't be starting with the more simple terrain as well as the more straightforward areas of development. And so, but the consultant for that is not here, but I have raised that question, and I wonder if this is something that you all have considered, any of you.
Well, because we're not considering that, we don't have all of the feedback yet. We'll see what the result of their analysis is, because staff is looking at the results of that feedback right now, as is the consultant, and the report that comes back to us might be different than the one that has been considered based upon feedback, because we don't even know what it is at this point.
Just wanted to raise it.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions? Right. I am not seeing anyone unmuted online, so we will then move into business. So our strategic priorities list. So there is the recommendation that the council strategic priorities for 2026 be adopted as presented in the staff report dated January 5th, 2026, and further that the CAO ensures staff work plans align with council's 2026 strategic priorities, and council be provided with quarterly updates on progress, and final review of council strategic priorities be scheduled for fall 2026. By Councillor Leithwood. Second for discussion. Second by Councillor Burt. Discussion?
Through the chair, the recommendation is that we adopt our strategic priorities for 2026. And so I'm looking, the document does reflect the strategic our discussions that we had during strategic planning, the things that we needed to get done, and some of the things that are, in process. But I have some kind of wondering about some of the strategic priorities that are listed here that say they are complete, such as number 12, public engagement and communications improvements is listed as complete in 2025, and that seems a bit of a stretch to me. So there's a couple of other ones that are records and information management system. I'm sure those are ongoing things rather than something that you could ever call complete. But this is all, I think that's kind of neither here nor there. I mean, this is a public facing document to suggest to the public that we have completed the improvements to public engagements a little bit. Just, you can never say that. So, but that's a quibble. What concerns me rather than the strategic priorities that have been listed is the process by which we hope to achieve them in the coming year, and the timelines, especially the timelines. I'm looking at I'm seeing that there is a lot heavily put in the first quarter. That there's an expectation of the bulk of all of our priorities to be completed in the first quarter, rather not too much at all in the second and third, and then the second largest bulk of efforts to be done in the fourth quarter. And I'll pull one out in particular that concerns me is the South Area Planning, which is one of our priorities for 2026. To adopt the plan in the first quarter and then wait all the way through till the fourth quarter to determine next steps. And I'm just, what's in the middle here? This is where I would think that public engagement and working with the housing society would be pretty critical before council's in a position to determine next steps. And also working with whatever kind of planning we think is required for, thinking, for instance, what like Bill Wells has mentioned, that kind of planning. Although that could be in the fourth quarter determined to do that, I'm still thinking we need a lot more public engagement in between. The human resources recruit manager of municipal services. And then if you look down, so that's the fourth quarter in 2026. And then if you look further down, the manager of municipal services has a lot to do all through the year. And yet we're recruiting him in the fourth quarter of 2026. So, I mean, that doesn't jive either to me. So I'm finding like, as a guide, I'm having some quibbling with like the way it's weighted and the kind of the timelines on a lot of these things. And I think all of these things are priorities that we have identified, but the timeline and the personnel to take care of it and the amount of time dedicated to public engagement is questionable to me.
So I'll answer to the best of my ability on the things that are listed as complete that you're quibbling about. Perhaps not having the 2025 plan in front of me, there may have been a specific task in that plan, not overall engagement, but a specific task, and that task has been completed. So like I said, not having the 2025 plan in front of me, I can't say. And the same with the other things. It might have been one task related to those items, not all engagement, because it's all ongoing, right? So we'd have to look at the two of them together to see whether that's achievable. And the staff one, I did ask CAO Baker about the timing for that, but not knowing, we know that we've had a couple of postings out for quite a length of time, and you don't know when you will be able to get someone to fill the role. But as CAO did outline, we've got one of the roles filled, and hopefully it won't take until fall, but you don't want to be too optimistic and say that it's going to happen, but you're hopeful that we're going to get someone who can do these things, and we might have to move it around. But I'll let CAO Baker take it from here.
Thank you, Mayor Hill. And so you're correct for the 2025 strategic priorities. When it comes to public engagement and communication improvements, council had one task: plan and conduct a town hall meeting that was completed in the first quarter of 2025. And so that item has been completed, and that's why it's marked complete on the staff report. So any of those items on the staff report that say complete, it's because whatever things council wanted to do are complete. And then when it comes to the South Kaslo Development Plan, it's envisioned that the plan will be adopted in the first quarter. And then it's unknown what council is going to want to do next. But it's hoped that council figures out its next steps before the end of your term. You might not have time to do start developing this in 2026, but the idea is by the end of your term, you would have a plan for what it might look like moving forward. So putting fourth quarter that was the intention. Could get figured out the second quarter or third quarter, but by the end of your term, it's hoped. And so that kind of idea follows through to probably several of the strategic priorities. When it comes to human resources, the mayor pointed out that we don't know when we'll have a manager of finance, corporate services, or municipal services. And so it was earmarked as the fourth quarter. The clerk was earmarked fourth quarter, but that'll be satisfied on Monday. And then, as discussed at council's strategic priorities planning sessions, if we don't hire a manager of finance, corporate services, or municipal services, well, then the vast majority of your strategic priorities will not be completed. And so they become rather irrelevant if we don't have staff to do the work. So you're correct in that, hey, we've earmarked it for first, second, third, fourth quarter for positions that are vacant. And that's 100% true.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. I also had noted about the public engagement, so it's good to understand why that's completed. My main concern is also with the timelines of how things are laid out. Recognizing that we may not have staff until the end of the year, which is why we've put some things in the fourth quarter, or at least just recognize we don't have our full complement in the first quarter. I'm concerned about how much is put into the first quarter. I'm also concerned about how it's laid out. I think that using the accessibility plan or the subdivision servicing bylaw as a template is a good way to go about it, in that A is in the first quarter, B is in the second quarter, C is in the third quarter, and D is in the fourth quarter. And that allows us to allow each step of the way the time that it needs in order to be able to properly do each step. When I look at the RV park, everything is put into the first quarter. It's A through M, which are 13 items, which are more than any other topic. And big things such as Indigenous consultation, water system capacity, referrals to the provinces, environmental reviews, archaeological reviews, sewage review, bylaws, road closures, rezoning, subdivision, all these really big things I'm concerned that are being rushed and not staged like all of the other parts of the plan. Also in recognition of what the CEO just said, which is that where we do not get staff, a lot of our priorities might not happen. Knowing that the RV park is front loaded and that there are a lot of other things, the municipal importance that are in second, third, and fourth quarter and not put into the first quarter is of concern to me. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand why the RV park hasn't been staged throughout the year to allow time for all these things in the same manner that many of the other items are.
And again, I'll take a stab at some of it. Some of them that are in the first quarter, I suspect are already in process, and that staff is fairly confident that those stages will be completed, because we do have our manager of strategic initiatives who will be doing some of that work as we speak. So those might be totally doable and realistic to be achieved in the first quarter. And as far as I guess, because it does say completion for the RV park, I'll let CAO address that one. Maybe it's initializing those things because those are not within our control because those are external agencies who would be doing those pieces of work. And yeah, other ones, like I said, it could be that they're already in process and they're totally achievable within the timelines that are in there. And I think we did discuss timelines at our strategic priorities meeting as a collective. So I'll turn it over to CAO Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. I have to apologize for scaring you on these things. So when it comes to the RV park, there's only one timeline. Hey, first quarter, get the agreements finalized. There's no timeline for the rest.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that first quarter doesn't carry all the way down. Oh,
Okay.
okay. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
that's true.
That's RV park.
Okay,
So sorry for the confusion.
Thank
You
you.
don't know when those things will be dealt with.
Okay.
Could go into 2027. Many of the other items that have the first quarter indicated, not always, but often it's related to the scope or design and cost estimates, which we need in the first quarter so that you can look at it for the second quarter budget planning, and then the work can occur in the third and fourth quarter. So that's why it's in the order it is. This schedule is going to change based on when we hire people or if we hire people. And so it's all going to move. Yeah, that's all I can say about that.
Mhm.
so it's not written in stone.
No, staff will come back quarterly at the minimum and give you the list with the revised dates. So you might remember over the last couple of years, every quarter we get together and it tells you where we're at and it gives you new dates every time.
Right. Councilor Bird.
Yeah, looking through the chair, looking at staff assignments and as far as the RV park goes, it's under CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. And yet you were just saying a minute ago that the Manager of Strategic Initiatives is taking care of a lot of those things. I'm wondering if we're going to maintain having a Manager of Strategic Initiatives, or will that position be available to do that sort of work?
And those were my words, not CAO Baker's words. So, about the manager of strategic initiatives being, working on some of those things. So I'll let you address that.
Yeah, so the Manager of Strategic Initiatives has not been assigned any work related to the RV park project.
Okay.
The Manager of Strategic Initiatives has not been assigned any work related to the proposed RV park project. They're not involved with the project. So, but just to comment on if and when a manager of municipal services is hired, which is your permanent version of your manager of strategic initiatives, so to speak. Once they're hired, there'll be a transition period where both of them are probably employed by the village. And there's this handover. So some of the projects will stay in the hands of Mr. Dunlop, and he'll take it through to completion. And the new manager coming in will pick up some of these other projects and start running with them.
Leetwood, did you have any questions?
To the chair. So it just sounded like that we would have them both. Like there would be a transition period, but we're not going to have them both as a regular part of our staff.
Through the chair, council has only ever approved a temporary manager of strategic initiatives. And then council gave direction to post the job for a permanent
Right.
full-time manager of municipal services.
Right.
So, yeah, staff cannot hire permanent employees for both those positions, only the new one.
Okay.
The temporary one dissolves, based on the transition.
Right, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, is there an end date on the manager of strategic initiatives contract? Or does it provide us the flexibility to have that depending on when we find an applicant?
It has an end date.
Okay. Yeah, I know that end date.
Probably worth talking about personnel issues
Yeah.
at another.
So the motion has been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Or I call the question? All those in favor? Is carried. Next item.
Both parts of that resolution?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Because it said and further, so I read
Okay,
it
thank you.
together.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. Right, so before I read the recommendation, I want to publicly thank the public members of the task force for taking the time to go through all of that work. I know I'm working on the one for the regional district, and there's a lot of reading to do. If our committee was anything like that one is, there's a lot of information to go through, and based upon the staff report, there was a lot of work that they did, and that was all volunteer. And I was very pleased with the members of the task force. They're very, important members. Well, all members of our community are important, but it was, I was very happy that they stepped up. So the recommendation is that the mayor provide a formal thank you to the members of the council remuneration task force for their time and contribution to this important process, and that state staff seek public input on the council remuneration task force final report by publishing the report on the village website, promoting it through official communication channels, and inviting written submissions from the public by January 20th, 26. And that staff prepare a summary of the public feedback on the council remuneration task force final report for council's consideration prior to making a final decision on remuneration adjustments. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. The next item is fees and charges amendment bylaw. So the updates in this section of the bylaw is relating to freedom of information requests, so that is in line with Schedule 1 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy regulation. It wasn't quite in keeping with what the actual is. So thanks staff for undertaking that update. So the recommendation is that the fees and charges amendment bylaw number 1331/2025, amendment number 6 be given first, second, and third reads. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leafwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Bylaw consolidation and revision authority bylaw 1322. So note that CAO Dunlop has made, or CAO Baker has made made the change, which I hope is satisfies what Councillor Bird had requested, that the corporate officer shall provide council with a copy of any bylaw that has been consolidated or revised under the authority of this bylaw within a reasonable time after such consolidation or revision. So the recommendation is that bylaw consolidation and revision authority bylaw 1322/2025 be given third reading. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leafwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next item is our outdoor burning regulation repeal bylaw. The recommendation is that the outdoor burning regulation repeal bylaw 1330/2025 be given third reading. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. Development procedures is bylaw amendment number 1. So the recommendation is that development procedures bylaw 1332/2025 amendment number 1 be adopted. By Councillor Leetwood, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Oh, no, so it's adoption, sorry. So all those in favor? Motion is carried. So, all right, 6:40, and so we'll be fine. We'll go into council procedures bylaw. CAO has received some feedback from both members of the public and some members of the council. And council has a compilation of the feedback received in the document that's been put before us on the table. We've just been able to put that together today for us to consider. And there will be an announcement going forward for seeking public input on this as well. So there's no recommendation at this time for this. It's just for us to have discussion for CAO to go through the points that were raised. All right. I'll hand it over to you, CAO Baker. Done.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So just to let you know, the information you have in front of you does not include anything from the public. Council's received public input through correspondence, and so council can take that into consideration. But the information that's on this document is just my attempt at collating all of the input from council members. And so there's a couple of things that I think are worth clarifying to start. One is that council meetings are business meetings. And I just want to stress the business part versus maybe it being like a public meeting. So certainly it's open to the public, but it's a business meeting of council. And the primary purpose is that we're making business decisions for the village. Having the public attend helps with accountability and transparency, but but public engagement isn't the primary purpose of the meeting. It's up to council then to exercise its discretion about how to involve the public in the meeting, if at all. It's not required by legislation to involve them in the meeting. You can just come here and have your meeting and discuss amongst yourselves, and you're totally fine. But council might decide it's worth having public input. It's up to you to decide. So maybe draw that into contrast, where if we have like a community-wide issue where we need some real input from the public, some real engagement, then that's when you're going to have your open houses, maybe surveys, public hearings, these kind of things. And the public can always provide input to you through mail or email or whatever makes sense for them. So with that in mind, the next point to clarify would be that council correspondence is for council. So that 57 is just noting clause 57 in the bylaw for you, just so you know. So council correspondence is for council. What does that mean? Well, all correspondence is sent from the public to council. They can do it at any time. There's no deadline. Council just receives it as it comes in. Some of that correspondence is not going to be within your jurisdiction. We can't do anything with it, or it's going to be operational in nature and staff will take action. The rest of it is probably going to be political, and that gets handled by council directly. If council has a piece of correspondence and wants to take action with it, well, then you submit it to, or under this bylaw, you would submit it to staff and ask that it get included on the agenda under other business, and that's where it would go. So generally, everything on the agenda is going to be related to an action. We're doing something. We're not just sitting around and talking about it. We need to make decisions. but you might receive a piece of correspondence that you still think is relevant in some way. Maybe you're not taking action on it, but maybe it's related to an agenda item, or it's still a political issue and you think it's worthy of finding its way onto the agenda. So you send that to staff and staff will include it as an information item. No action is going to be taken, no discussion is going to happen because there's no recommendation or resolution coming, but it still sits there on the agenda. So those are the two ways in which council gets to decide what goes on the agenda. You have correspondence for action and then just correspondence for information only. And they have different places on the agenda. All of that would be due by noon on Tuesday, the week before the meeting. That timeline is in the new bylaw is the same as the last bylaw or the current bylaw. Noon on Tuesday, nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is the new bylaw, proposed bylaw, allows items for action as well as just information items. Whereas the current bylaw only talks about items for action. It doesn't say that correspondence for information only belongs on the agenda. We're ignoring that right now. We're not in full compliance necessarily with our current bylaw, but we need to clean that piece up. We need to make it clear what council wants on the agenda when it comes to correspondence. And based on the feedback of the discussions that have happened over the last year, it sounds like you would like correspondence to take action on. And also sometimes, just relevant information only to have on the agenda. So that's what the new bylaw clarifies. And that's very different than public input sessions. Public input sessions are for the public, whereas council correspondence was all about council. So when we're talking about the public, after the agenda is published on Friday, the public's going to have an idea of what you're going to consider at your Tuesday meeting, and they might have something to say about it. And so council's got to decide, do we want to let the public provide input after the agenda is published? Right now you do. You have this question period where the public can supposed to ask questions on items on the agenda. Our council has been lenient with that, I think. Sometimes kind of allows comments, or maybe it's a question that has nothing to do with an agenda item. But right now you allow public input in some form based after the agenda is published. And so usually that input that you're getting relates to something that was on the agenda. It's not required in the new bylaw, but it usually is going to relate to it. The current bylaw does not allow any input unless it's related to an agenda item. And since we're bending the rules right now, well, we should probably clean it up. Either allow more than just agenda topics, or hold your line and say, no, we're not letting you talk about anything that's not on the agenda. Further, if you're going to have people who can't attend a council meeting or don't like to speak in front of people. And so it might make sense to let them provide their input in writing to the council meeting. You don't have to, but it seems like it might be fair. And then people have two options. I can speak or I can write it down. The new bylaw allows for that. Both options. The current bylaw, no, it's only verbal, nothing in writing. So if the public now wants their input to be received by council under this new bylaw, they need to do it through verbal or written input at a council meeting. That's their opportunity. They can speak, they can submit it in writing. It doesn't have to come after Friday. Like, they can send it anytime they want. Right? They just need to say, hey, I want to submit my written public input. And that's how they're going to do it. The topics that I think are up for discussion right now is whether council wants to give the public an opportunity to provide input after the agenda is published on Friday. And if you want to give them an opportunity to provide input, then staff would recommend you let them do verbal and written. And if you don't want to give them the opportunity to provide input after the agenda is published, then we can remove public input sessions from the bylaw. And there won't be any public input at the council meeting. So that would be the first, I think, item that should be discussed. And the second one is whether to allow the second public input session at the end. Maybe I can turn it back over to the mayor and the council.
So, so from the two questions that were posed, so, the concept of public input at all. So, Councillor Brown.
So I feel yes, public input is incredibly valuable. I would be for, as the public doesn't see the agenda until Friday when it's published. I think there's lots of sense in allowing them to be able to give verbal and written input into the agenda once they see it. As the prior practice was that it needed to be on the agenda that they were talking about. It makes good sense that they are be allowed to see that agenda before they decide whether or not they would like to provide input upon that. So I would be in favor of allowing that both verbal and written once the agenda has been published.
Councillor Leithwood.
The chair. I think we definitely do need public input. I think the system that we've had for several years has worked successfully. It didn't work during South Beach because we were overwhelmed with the response of people. And I think we should have recognized sooner we needed a bigger venue for people to express their opinion. But for the most part, the question period that we've had has worked successfully. And I don't really see the need to change that. I think, written submissions can be letters. And I think if we start opening it up too much, it's going to be onerous for staff, for council. And we're still going to put a time limit, whether it's written or questioned. So I think we should just keep the way it's been for many, many years successfully, but ensure that we're providing other opportunities for the public to express their opinion, like, open houses, more than one a year. And when we start recognizing that an issue is getting controversial, then we've got to get on having an open house way sooner than we did with South Beach.
Councillor Burke, do you have a comment?
Through the chair, I'm in agreement with Matt that, I'm in agreement with all of us that public input at the meeting is important. And I think it's kind of an original idea to allow the written, that somebody could submit it in writing, and then that your public input is actually going to be heard. You can recognize that it's being heard by council, and it's also a way to share in the community, which seems to be rather important. And that is because, yes, we are a council doing business, but we are also part of the community as well. And I feel like it's important to encourage that sense of community and not an us and them sort of thing. So I'm in favor of allowing both oral submissions, ad hoc, and also written submissions, to the extent that the staff feels they can manage it. And if staff does get overwhelmed with it, well, then we'll just have to be frank about there was too big a volume for us to be able to manage it. Just be open about it. But I do like the thought. My concern is staff ability to handle it from time to time.
Right. So I'll offer a couple of comments. I also agree with allowing both verbal and written, as long as it's clear to the members of the public that the submissions aren't actionable. They're for information, and because it could be really close to the meeting time, council may not, because there are many of us who work, may not have time to read. If there's a lot of written input, we may not have a chance to go through it all. But you know what, we all do our best. And yeah, that was primarily it. And I shared the concerns with it being, you know, more work for staff in a close time frame, because it all has to be compiled for distribution to council. But it comes to council. It does not become part of that meeting package. Is that correct? Because we're not going to open up the agenda and make it part of the agenda. It'll be for council to receive through email. Is that just so we can?
So, thank you
For the
for
written,
doing it.
yeah.
Yeah, so, correspondence for action, correspondence for information only. That's council stuff. It appears on the agenda because it's due the Tuesday before.
Yeah.
It'll appear on the agenda. Public input comes after the agenda is published, so it can't be on the agenda. We have a placeholder for it, but the actual content isn't there. And so it will form part of the minutes. The written letters and everything you receive will form part of the minutes. So it's part of the record. It's just not part of the agenda.
For clarity, it'll be the name of the individual submitting the input and the topic, but it's not their full submission.
It'll be their written input. So
Oh, the full
they're gonna-
submission.
yeah,
Okay,
there's going to be a form they complete or the
Okay.
constraints we have on it, and the actual their writing will form part of the public record. It'll be available for public review. It'll, yeah.
okay. Councillor Leithwood.
Sure. So then will the mayor read that out? Like, if the purpose is for the public input, then like we're listening to people ask a question and we're giving them an answer. So if somebody submits a written submission, it's just for our eyes, like the mayor's not going to read it out or anything. I mean, one of the reasons people ask questions is so that everybody can hear the answer, especially if it's on a specific issue. So I just wonder how that's going to get handled then.
Through the chair, the written input is council receives it and reads it. Nobody speaks it. You just read it and take it into consideration when you perhaps come to an agenda item later in the meeting and you think back about it, or you might refer back to it, but nobody's reading it. It's just received in written format by council and then will become part of the written record for the public to view later.
And just to clarify, we're not that restricting the verbal to questions. It can be,
Right, yeah, I know that.
well, just for
Okay.
not just, I know you understand that, but just
Oh.
because for the members of the public, it can be just information that's provided. You don't have to now take what you want to give as information and frame it as a question under the new bylaw. It can be, if you want council to consider what you have to say in the context of the day's meeting, you can just say, I want to give this information for council to consider without having to say, will you do this as a question? Correct? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and maybe just one other comment. So written public input and verbal public input are for council. It's not for the public.
Right.
It's for you to help you with your deliberations. And so there's not necessarily need to read the written input. You can just read it as a council member and you've received it. And that's the purpose of it. It's not to put, that's why I tried to stress at the beginning of kind of this conversation is council meetings are for council, or, it's a business meeting for you to make a decision. It's not for the public. It's for you. And so, yeah, I think maybe then it seems like there's a consensus that council wants written and public input as part of its agenda. And so then there's the second question of,
The second public.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
To the chair, I was actually intrigued when I saw a second public input session at the end of the meeting. Something I never considered. At first, I kind of didn't really see the value of it in that most of the business of the meeting is done. So to then hear input once we've made decisions didn't completely click with me. More I think about it, often, and in our question period today, we directed to the public that we would talk about those things once they came up to the agenda. So oftentimes we're not really able to address questions because they will be addressed by the agenda. And so having a second public input session at the end, once their question may or may not have been addressed, I think makes a lot of sense in that it gives them an opportunity, should the agenda item not have addressed their question or comment, to be able to put that into context that we may not have had during the meeting. The more I consider it, the more value I see in it, and I would be for allowing a second public input session at the end of the meeting.
So we'll go to Councillor Burt.
Yeah, through the chair, I like the idea of a second public input session because I imagine it will be mostly a request for clarity. Like there is so much that we have decided on our own. We come and we make a decision, and sometimes it seems rather quick. But it's not that we haven't spent hours sort of figuring it out on our own. And there may be times when people wonder what on earth, just a request for clarity on some things. And just as in the regular go of things, as people are discussing things, some things might get lost. And like we always ask Valley Voice at the end, do you have any questions? Do you need any clarity? This is just the same thing, but with giving the opportunity to the people who chose to attend the whole meeting, which you gotta give them credit for.
Councillor Leetwood.
Chair. When we started question period years ago, it was at the end of the meeting. So I don't know why we can't just go back to having the question clarification period at the end of the meeting. But only what? I mean, we're making it so that people can talk. They don't have to address the agenda item. So why do we need one before the business? Why don't we just have one at the end?
can I just add something to kind of help soften all of that? There's communities that don't have any of this in their meeting at all. So it's not a crazy idea to only have one session at the end. It's not a crazy idea to have none of it. I just don't want council to feel like I just want you to know you have options and all of it's okay.
And I guess the discussion that we've just had raises a question for me, whether we do limit what the input can be at the beginning, at the end. Do you have the second one be focused on clarifying questions, or is it open to anything under the sun? And the same with the first one, right? Is it just related to providing information on agenda items, or could it be on any topic? Do we want to focus it in that fashion, or just leave it, if we go with two, do we want to do that? put some form of restriction, so it can be clarified for members of the public. Councillor Leaford.
I don't really see the value in that because, like, again, whatever procedure we adopt, we need to follow. And that's one of the things that happened.
Yeah.
Recently, we weren't following our procedures. So, I think it's going to be like, it's starting to get more convoluted. If we have to start, saying to the public, okay, you can only ask this type of question right now. And then we're going to have the meeting and, deliberate for however long the meeting. And then we're going to have another question period where we're going to say, you can only ask this type of question. So to me, it seems like just keep it simple. Have a question period at the end or whatever you want to call it. And let them ask their whatever they want about whatever they want, or have their submission and make it easy on everybody.
Councillor Bird.
The reason, through the chair, I'm totally agreement with what you're saying there, Molly, like keep it simple. But the reason that it is valuable to get public input before you do your business is potentially somebody is going to be speaking to an item on the business. They've only seen this since Friday. So, I'm a member of the public and I look at this agenda and they're talking about my neighborhood. There's something I really would like to say about it that you probably don't know. And that's why I come up to public input period and say, did you know in my neighborhood, my water pressure is like really, really zero and it's been like this for months. So if you're going to be talking about sharing that water with a South Area plan, then do you know this? That's the kind of input that council maybe didn't know. So they have that, the reason to have public input before we do our business is in case there's someone who's got something to say about something that they've noticed on the agenda, and that's why they show up. And then I would think typically at the end, it would be request for clarification, or you're going to get the odd person who's going to say, and I really disgusted at council for saying this, making that thing, and let it swallow it, you take that. That's totally fair. So, I agree that restrictions don't make any sense, but I would like to keep both.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I'm in agreement with what Councillor Bird just said. And I think that having the second public input session at the end be for clarification only, I think makes a lot of sense. Especially in that our meetings tend to run pretty long. So then to add something at the very end, I think that defining that through clarifying questions allows it to stay brief and focused, whereas a input session at the beginning would allow it to be a little bit more broad. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm in favor of having both and having the second one be clarifying in nature only.
So, well, and we're going to receive public input on this. So we will discuss it again and see, and Councillor Lang isn't here as well, and he may have additional input. And members of the public also do have the option of watching the videos back, because then they could hear verbatim, and especially since our sound is better now that thanks to staff, we've got a better system. I haven't heard actually any complaints about the new system, so I'm hoping that it's working better so that they could watch it back. And it's also in the minutes. The decisions taken go in the minutes. We don't put a lot of detail, because what do you have staff capture in minutes? You can't capture all the conversation. So we, by nature, the minutes are noting our business actions that we're taking. So, all right. So Now we'll go on to the next section, verbal public.
Okay, Mayor Hewitt, verbal public input, clauses 61 to 69. So concerns were raised about registering at the beginning of the meeting. We don't want to delay the meeting because there's this registration process going on. What kind of input will we permit for the verbal session? Do we limit the number of topics that they're allowed to speak on or the number of questions? What about council then having questions or comments in response, dealing with unruly behavior? And then, of course, how do we communicate all this to the public so they actually understand what the rules are? So there's a few discussion points. First, so we've settled, I think we've settled that there's going to be public input sessions at the meeting. And so what might make sense is for staff to either develop a verbal public input policy, just like the written one, that outlines the rules. So, you know, you can register, it'll be at the door. Staff will remove it a few minutes before the meeting starts. You can't add your name after, that's the list. We're going to go in order. You get 2 minutes. Council will not interact with you during your speaking, these kind of things. So we lay out the rules in a policy. Maybe that makes sense, or maybe it's small enough that whatever restrictions council wants to put on it, we can put in the bylaw. I think we don't have to decide that right now, but a policy might make sense to make it kind of congruent with the written public input side. So I have put on here a few items that might be good for the policy or bylaw. I'll just read them. Members of the public wishing to provide verbal input must register prior to the meeting. Registration will close a few minutes before the scheduled start time, and late arrivals will not be added to the list. Is there any concerns with that?
Councillor Leitwick?
So who's going to be doing that? Like, are you going to do that? Is the mayor going to do that? Like, who's going to be recording those?
The names, I think it was in the, well, it was in the bylaw that they had to put their name and their address or their.
Yeah,
was some.
that's not what I'm asking. So they're going to provide the information. Are they giving it to the CAO? Are they giving it to you? Like,
It will come to.
it seems like, what if there's 15 people that want to do that? Like, our meeting start at 6 o'clock. Does that mean we have to be here 5:45 so we can start recording people's, like the ones that want to speak? Or
The list, well, staff can outline where it would be, maybe on the end counter. And then just before the meeting, it could be brought in. So I don't think council members need to be here 15 minutes early because you're not registering to write your name down.
no, I know that. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Some of these things, it seems like are going to require work by certain people. So who's going to be the person then, whoever, wherever they fill their name in? Are you going to then go over and get the list or? So,
And
Yeah.
so through the chair, the idea was that the list would sit near the door, folks would show up and register. And then 5 minutes before the meeting, staff would grab the list, provide it to the mayor, and that's it.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, so far, I think you've done a very good job of finding people who need to speak and making sure that they're all in order, and I don't think, I've never seen you have any problem with that, and I think it just adds the registration thing adds a further complication. I mean, maybe in the future, we'll have a mayor who wants to have it all like written out ahead of time so they don't have to look around, but it's, with you, it's working fine. I don't see any need to change, to get any more formal, than it is. But I do find that most of the public's quite educated about meeting procedures and they put their hands up or, you know, I don't think it's been a problem. So if it's not been a problem, then it doesn't require a solution in my mind.
All right. Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, I'm a bit on both sides, to be honest. Because I do see the value in having, the order of a list. That being said, I'm in 100% agreement with what both counselors just said, in that at this point, it hasn't seemed to be a problem where people haven't been heard,
Mhm.
and you've managed meetings successfully to the point where this hasn't become an issue. This perhaps might be in here in that then regardless of who's sitting in the mayor's chair, that they're not feeling the pressure to be able to manage all of that.
Right.
It gives a answer to how that's dealt with. And so I'm in favor of it in that it actually formalizes something as opposed to leaving it up to the time management skills of the chair. That being said, like our chair manages it wonderfully, so I don't have a large enough concern about it where I feel like it's necessary at the moment.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, how about language where the chair may decide to have a registration list for public input, and then it's your choice.
Yes.
That one could be problematic because you can't decide that during a meeting, right? So once you're in there, in the meeting, that your path is determined, right? And so, but the thing to recognize is these are policies that they could be changed at any time.
Mhm.
If situation ends up that, depending, whether we have a large topic, an ongoing topic that needs us to do that. There's in many of the places, there's the ability for council to, by agreement, extend a question period or, so, they can be changed at any time, essentially. So it's not like this isn't it forever. Yeah. So, sounds like we're pretty much in agreement that we don't need the registration ahead of time. Okay. All right. All right. The next one.
I'm just gonna draw council's attention to the item that says clause 65. There's an and the proposed amendment is that speakers may address council to comment on items included in the current agenda, meeting agenda only. So if we amend what they're allowed to speak about verbally, i.e. you can only speak about things on the agenda, then staff will also need to amend the written public input policy so that it's clear we will only receive written public input on agenda items.
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, am I correct in saying that the written input would need to be received by the Tuesday, whereas the agenda wouldn't be available until the Friday? Or is that?
No. Don't confuse correspondence and written public input.
Then I suppose, that was my main concern, was that people have enough time to be able to have seen the agenda to be able to actually know whether they'd like to bring something up that's going to be in there or not. I like the idea of keeping it to what is in the agenda because it keeps the meeting focused on council business, which I think is very, very important. And there are mechanisms for public to be able to bring up topics that aren't within the business of that agenda that would then hit the next council meeting, and would offer us an opportunity to be able to address those without being drawn away from the business at hand. So I suppose I'm saying that I would be in favor of limiting to what is on the specific agenda for that meeting.
For the verbal.
Well, I suppose for the verbal and the written, is
Right.
saying to be able to keep them, in
Instead,
lockstep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Counselor Bird.
Through the chair, I'd be okay with that, but this is, the understanding is you could submit correspondence to council on any topic. And if you do so before noon on Tuesday, the prior Tuesday, then any member of council can flag it and make sure that, this is not on, I don't expect this to be on the next agenda, but it's interesting and I'd like to bring it forward for discussion, whether action may be taken or not, but it's worth bringing up. So a member of the public can provide council with a written input on any topic, and if they get it within a week's time before the meeting, then if it's important enough, it will get brought up and put on the agenda. But the commentary that we are inviting either in written or oral form at the meeting should be focused on the meeting. By saying that it should be focused on the meeting, public input, we are not saying that you cannot provide input on any topic you choose. But if you're going to provide input on a topic that we are not considering, then we need a week's notice to think about it.
All right, so we're saying now something contrary to what we just discussed.
No,
No, in the previous one, because I asked whether it was the one was about agenda items only,
oh,
right? And then or on any topic, and I didn't. People didn't want it to be focused, right? That's where I was going with that. Do we want it to be focused on a certain type of input at the beginning of the meeting? And it sounded like, from what I understood, that we did not want to limit that verbal or written. So we're now changing. We got to decide which way it is. This is the details of the policy. So we've got to decide, is it focused on a certain type, or can it be anything? Because as you outlined, it can be received as correspondence, but will have its own handling, right? So if it goes as correspondence like that, it may not make an agenda because it's not something that's currently, council is dealing with. So it doesn't really need to be discussed. It's just received for information, the correspondence. So, Councillor Leithwood.
We're making it really complicated. It really doesn't need to be, and I think we should just continue the policy, of it being about the agenda items. And then if people have other issues, they can write their letters and, bring it up at our open house or whatever. And that's again, so how do we separate? If it's only about the agenda and we're having our 2 question periods, again, it's redundant. It seems redundant.
No, the last one is for clarification. If somebody.
Yeah, I know
wasn't-
that
yeah,
on the agenda. I know that.
yeah, but
Yeah. Anyway, it seems to be, this is getting way too complicated. And the public have to understand this too. It's hard enough for us to understand it, but the public need to understand where we're going to.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I'm in agreement that the most important part of all of this is that it's simple enough that the public can grasp it and actually work with it, and it doesn't become a hindrance to engagement, but actually, helps us to further that. I think that it being as clear as the public input session before would be limited to things that were on the agenda, and the public input after is for clarification only. That is simplified enough that I think it won't inhibit people to be able to engage meaningfully. And so I would be in favor of being as brief as we can be with those statements, in that the first public input is limited to agenda items. The second public input is limited to clarification on something that happened in the meeting.
So then, before you went into clause 64, we had, the registration, we stopped with that, but then there's the next one was operational or procedural questions will not be answered during the session. The chair will direct speakers to contact staff, because those are operational and that's not council's purview. Um,
I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm gonna roll those statements. We didn't talk about them, but I
okay,
think they're not
Okay.
really controversial, so they'll
Right,
probably get
okay.
rolled into a policy or yeah,
Okay.
it's gonna, I think a policy is gonna make sense for verbal,
okay,
and those will be in there. And
Okay.
so I think I've got good input all the way up through clause 65, so then it's clause 67.
okay. I just wanted to also read, just for the benefit of the public who aren't seeing
Okay.
this, that the last bullet point is council is not required to respond to comments or questions from the public during the public input session. So, because if it's a statement, sometimes there is no response, right? But which it could be, even though it's related to an agenda item, a person may just be making a statement about something. Okay, so go ahead. CEO Baker.
Mayor Hewitt, so clause 67, there's a proposed amendment. I'll read it and then I'll kind of highlight what the change is. Council members shall not engage with speakers during the public input period until all speakers have concluded. Following the completion of the public input session, members may, through the presiding members, speak once for the sole purpose of responding to comments or asking brief clarifying questions. Such questions shall not lead to debate. Presiding member retains authority to manage time, order, and ensure compliance with these provisions. And so what's different about this proposed amendment is that members are given, members can speak. It's not only with the permission of the presiding member. They kind of have the right, so to speak. They just have to speak through the chair. And when they do so, they need to keep their comments or questions brief. It's not back and forth, and they only get to speak once. So you can imagine the public input session ends and the chair thanks everyone and perhaps makes some comments, and then goes around and asks each counselor if they have a question or a comment, and you get to everybody gets to go once, and then that's it. And the intention is that you've had 10 minutes or whatever it is of public input. Now we can have 5 minutes of comment and clarification, but then we need to move on to our business. So that's part of the intention there, is to keep it tight.
Councillor Brown.
To the chair, clarifying question. Let's say that we have 10 public speakers. We're writing down diligently our questions or clarifying kind of statements around them. When we're offered an opportunity, perhaps I have a question from two different people. Would I then only have an opportunity to ask one of those two questions, or do I have one opportunity to ask all of the clarifying questions that I would have had?
The way I read this is that the member only speaks once. That doesn't mean that you're limited
Okay.
or brief clarifying questions, plural.
Okay.
I think the intent is that you're not going to take 5 minutes to answer, right? But from the way I'm reading this, that it's multiple, it could be multiple. Or you might be able to, some of them might be about the same topic and you can cover it together. Is that what the intent was?
Yeah, through the chair, I'd say that's the intent. We're
Yeah.
trying to limit council's engagement afterwards to like 5 minutes, because we have a meeting, to do. That said, council gets to decide what you want to do, but
Yeah.
the intention with the wording here is you speak once, you ask your questions or make your comments, the speaker would respond or speakers would respond, and then it's on to the next counselor.
Councillor Leetwood.
Through the chair. That seems to me is gonna take up our question time. So if we've got 10 public members who want to ask a question, and we're allowing each council member to answer or whatever, if the person asking, then that's gonna really limit the time we have for questions. So if you want to keep the meeting flowing. I mean, we're only giving a certain amount of time for these two periods of public input, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we saw through, there were several times that we had to increase the question period time. So this seems to me like we're gonna run into then only being allowed to answer 2 or 3 questions, and then it kind of defeats the purpose of the public input opportunity.
But we're not limiting it to questions. They may be just.
Yeah, I know.
Statements.
Questions. No, what I'm talking about is what if 10 of those people, whether asking a question or making a statement, and council is allowed to speak once at each one of those, right? That's gonna really limit the time we have for that input session, unless we want to take up our meeting time.
I understand it that each counselor gets to speak once, not to each person who's asked a question. So if 10 people asked, we're not gonna ask, the council member can't ask each member of the public who's spoken another question. It's
Okay.
one time opportunity to speak
Okay.
about all of the questions.
Well, you said multiple times, so.
No, not multiple times. They can questions within their one time. If they can, that's the way I understand it. They're speaking one time only, the council member, but it could be answering not individual questions, but it may, because we don't know what they're gonna ask, right? So, but each member would speak once following the submissions.
Supplemental.
Yeah.
So like what is precipitating that change to the procedure? I mean, I understand why we're wanting to change some procedures, but has that been an issue that like, I don't remember it being much of an issue that I know there were a couple of times during the South Beach discussions that other council members, but is it really that much of an issue that we need to have that option? That's going to add more time to this.
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair. What I like about this is that it doesn't mandate, but it offers an opportunity for council to be able to engage in question period, where the way that it is built now, all of the answers, the mayor has an opportunity and council doesn't have an opportunity to address. This doesn't mandate that we have an opportunity to address, but at the chair's discretion, it offers us an opportunity that we would not have been afforded otherwise. And so I think that is a improvement and allows council more space to be able to engage within reason. Yeah.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, I'm in favor of this as well, and I think really we just have to make the assumption, which I do, that we're all reasonable people and we're not gonna be like wasting everybody's time, and that we should have the opportunity to speak as freely as possible within reason, and one assumes councillors get voted into office because they're reasonable.
And these other limitations about procedural questions, those things, like if it's to do with an agenda item where it's already limited, right? So if it's clarifying it might be clarifying what somebody wanted to provide for input based upon what the agenda is. So, yeah. Yep. And that it's not a back and forth. Yeah, shall we take a brief recess? Or, because we've still got pages. I think we will take a 5-minute recess. Okay, so can we just make a motion that we recess for 5 minutes? Okay, okay.
Send an email right now. Send you that email right now. Yeah, about the
Oh,
copy of the report.
right. So I think we were on, all right, are we ready? On the discussion of the consent agenda.
Yeah, Mayor Hewitt, shall I take it away? Okay.
Yes, please.
Awesome. This, this might not be meaningful to everyone, but a point for discussion for those that are interested. So for consent agenda, it says that amongst other things, reports for information. Sorry, maybe I'll pull up and give you. So it says items that may be included in the consent agenda are, and what probably makes sense to remove is the reports for information. So when there's a consent agenda, council is going to have one resolution and adopt all recommendations that are part of it. But reports for information do not need to be adopted. They just need to appear on the agenda, and by virtue of them being there, they're deemed to be received by council. So what's recommended here is that it be deleted from 74, clause 74, and moved to the information items section of the agenda, where no action is going to be taken. It's there. So hopefully that's not controversial. And then it's on to notices of motion. So just some clarification here. Notices of motion are intended to be different than correspondence for action. So they're both going to appear in the same place on an agenda. So under other business, you'll have correspondence for action. That's items that council wants there to be action taken on. And as another subtopic, there would be something called motion served. So I think you know how correspondence for action gets on the agenda. That's things council wants there. Then, and they would get it there by noon the Tuesday before. Notice of motion happens during a meeting. So council's going around the table doing their verbal reports, and a councillor might say, I'd like to make a notice of motion in regards to the procedures bylaw. And so then after the meeting, they're going to put their thoughts together, background info, a memo, craft a recommendation. They're going to submit it to staff. Staff are going to put it on the agenda under other business, subsection, motion served. So the difference between a notice of motion and correspondence for action, notice of motion happens at a meeting, and then it's going to be talked about at the next meeting. Correspondence for action is happening anytime, as long as it's before noon on a Tuesday, and then it's on the agenda. So just to clarify that difference, and see if there's any questions.
Councillor Root.
Through the chair. So previously, we could, as councillor, or as the mayor, at any point in the meeting, we would like to declare a notice of motion. And what I'm getting here is that we are now being restricted only to, the time when we are giving our reports. When we give a verbal report, that's the only time that we can give a notice of motion. When it's previously been that you could give a notice of motion at any point.
Through the chair, so council can decide if, yeah, they want to restrict it to that moment in the meeting, or if it's okay to happen at any time, maybe during the discussion of a business item. Counselor says, I'd like to make a notice of motion. I don't think there's necessarily any harm in it. I don't, but also I don't know. I've never been at a meeting where one has happened. And I don't know how often it's happened here in Kaslo.
I didn't notice.
Yeah.
When our former municipal services clerk or whatever the title was at the time, I made one just to test drive the new one because it was something that I think it arose as in the information items or correspondence. And because it hadn't been something that staff had been able to research. So I don't think, regarding it being something on the agenda, if it's an agenda item we're discussing, the person, a council member could make it a motion at any time, right? We're not supposed to discuss things not related to our agenda item. So, perhaps it could be you finish with the item and the business item has twigged something that you want a different action taken, and you can state a notice of motion about whatever it was. It might be related, but not contingent on the motion that you're currently making, right? I'm not sure whether I'm stating that correctly. It's something that comes up in discussion and it makes you think of a certain motion and it makes you think, I would like to discuss this item at the next meeting. And then that also gives staff an opportunity to work with the council member to develop the motion and do any research, because you don't want to make a motion that's contrary to policy. And if staff doesn't have the benefit of being able to do that analyzing, then we might be making a motion that we can't actually action. Councillor Lutwood.
To the chair. I mean, what we've done in the past, it hasn't been necessarily about an agenda item. I think we used to just email the CAO and say, I want to make a notice of motion about this.
Yeah.
And then it appears on the agenda that there will be a notice of motion for the next council meeting, but it wasn't specifically about whatever's on that agenda.
No, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I think it would be best if we did not restrict when you could make a notice of motion.
But it can't be in the middle of discussing an agenda item that has a motion on the table. It has to wait until afterwards. Yeah. Because that's what's done at the regional district. You can make a notice of motion anytime, but that's all it is. You can't debate,
Right.
but it is at that time, you just state notice of motion on the topic. End of story. And then staff takes it, notes it in the minutes, and it goes to the next meeting. Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, just a clarifying question. In the example that you gave, a motion was made to provide staff time to be able to do background information. In the example that was provided, we're given time for us to be able to do the research personally and then bring that forward at the next meeting.
Okay.
Can that be made to allow staff time, or is this specifically to allow council time to have these deliberations, or can we do it on behalf of staff? Because my understanding is that a notice of motion is a personal thing and not something that we would be doing for staff. I really love the idea that you presented of being able to work with staff on that notice of motion, to be able to kind of make sure they're aware and also to be able to gain the benefit of their knowledge as you're going through that process.
Yeah.
But I just want to clarify, Kate.
Yeah, well, I'll use Joni's first name, but the intent there was to actually craft the motion itself. You might not make a decision at that meeting. It might end up being referred. If it comes as a notice of motion to the next meeting, it still might need, if it's substantive enough that it needs staff time, it might be referred to a future council meeting, allowing staff time to do the research, because they're not, until it becomes council's resolution and voted on, then staff shouldn't do any other work besides helping
Right.
craft a motion. We just want to get, the intent, I think, behind that was that we weren't at the table trying to craft a motion, that takes
Yeah.
plenty of time to get it done properly.
Mhm.
So, does that help?
Totally.
Okay, and yes. All right. Okay. I'll let you keep going.
Okay.
Baker?
Presentations and delegations.
Ask a question
Oh,
about that.
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Counselor.
For correspondence for action. So I still don't, like, this is not very clear to me from the other counselor's perspective. So if somebody has something they want to pull and have an action item, how would we get prepared for that? Like, usually if there's a business item, there's staff reports and all those kind of things. So if someone's going to introduce something that we have no prior knowledge of. So will we even be able to make a reasonable decision if we don't have any information or anything on it?
Well, what I would suggest there is if a council member, feels that they don't have enough information and they want to get further information, you can make a motion to refer at any time, and that stops debate. A motion to refer to either the next meeting, or maybe like at the regional district, you might have started a discussion before lunch, and then you'll say refer it to after lunch for staff, to give staff time to look into something, but you would refer it. And then the only discussion is on the merits of referring the item, not the item itself. So then it puts it to another meeting, and then you state what you would like to happen, right? You'd like to refer it to allow, and have staff come back with a report or, yes, is that okay?
Let's just make sure I understand. So through the chair, the question was, you're sitting at a meeting. A notice of motion had been issued last meeting. Now you're sitting at a meeting, you get to other business, and you're dealing with a piece of correspondence for action. And you feel like there's, or perhaps even motion served, and you're feeling like there's not enough info there. Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
Yeah.
That's not what I take correspondence for action is. Like, I'm not talking about a notice of motion.
Okay.
I'm talking about if there's a piece of correspondence in the circulation package and a counselor pulls it and wants it under business for action. And they have till noon the day of the council meeting. How do we get prepared for that, the rest of us?
Through the chair, circulation package doesn't exist under.
Well, our list where we find the correspondence people send to us. I mean, there's still going to be a list available for us, right? It may not be on an agenda item, but we will still know who's written to us. Right?
So through the chair, you would only know, you're gonna have in your email inbox, that's it.
Okay, so however we get it.
Yeah.
So somebody sees an email from somebody and they want to pull it
Yeah.
as correspondence for action, and they do it at 11:59 on Tuesday. How do the rest of us prepare for that? We will have no.
And we need ahead.
Staff.
Yeah, that's,
A week ahead.
yeah,
It says,
by noon on the Tuesday before a council.
oh, before. Okay,
Right.
sorry. I thought it meant, because before we were talking about up until a certain time.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
It'll appear on the agenda, you
Yeah.
will see it Friday.
I get it. Okay.
Councillor Brown.
The chair, and then if I understand correctly, then were a counselor to want to pull it at that meeting, it would require all of us to vote that we would want that. So it could be something where one counselor was surprised, we would all have to vote unanimously in order to bring that to the meeting. Is that correct?
No,
No?
because
I thought there was a mechanism, if I understood it correctly, that were we to want to bring something up and add it to business at that meeting, that there would be a mechanism for us to do that, but it would require unanimous consent.
we did talk about that.
Hourly now.
Yeah. And then that would be where all of a sudden, if I brought something up, you might not have the benefit of having thought about that, but you would have the benefit of voting whether or not we can do it or not. I think that's the mechanism that would prevent that.
Correct, clause 81.
Okay.
Unanimous vote of all members present at a late item.
Yeah, that's what thank you.
Councillor Bird, did you have something? No. I could think of one example, like from our last meeting, or I think it was our last meeting, there was the item from Communities in Bloom. So if a council member said, we would like, their motion was we staff to investigate the cost of joining Communities in Bloom. That one would be something that was easy and it's not needing staff research.
Yeah.
So that might be an easy one to introduce in that session. But if it's something that's more complex, you know, we want to sign up for Communities in Bloom and put it in the budget.
Right.
You want to look at, who's going to deliver the program and that kind of thing. So, yeah. Until you start putting some of these things into practice, it's hard to wrap your head around, because we have had a system that we've used for a long time, and, council is used to it and the public is used to it. So it is a change. And change is sometimes is hard to wrap your head around, but we'll get there. All right, so where were you at, CAO Baker? Oh, presentations and delegations.
Thanks, Mayor Hewitt. So clauses 18 to 85 are all about presentations and delegations. And there's a proposal that we amalgamate the two different types and just call it one thing. We don't differentiate between it, and then come up with our rules from there. How many days beforehand do you need to submit? How long is it? How many do we have at each meeting? But we just get rid of the difference between the two. It's just presentation, delegation, whatever it is. We got two of them. Come on down.
Councillor Leafwood?
To the chair. Well, I think it's worked okay, the way we've been doing it. I don't see really a difference between the delegation or a presentation. I mean, they're both providing information or opinions or whatever. I don't think we should be limiting 1 to 5 minutes. That's not enough time for someone to give like a little PowerPoint or something. So I don't really see that we need to make much change to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's worked pretty successfully.
Let's just maybe comment on
Yeah,
that.
go
So
ahead.
the challenge we have right now is that delegations are only allowed to come and present to council on a topic that's on the agenda. And that has not worked well for the public. And there's been times where the rules have been bent and we have allowed it and then not. And so it needs to be affirmed what council wants. Presentations, you can talk on any topic you want. Right now, you can only talk on an agenda item. That's what's in the bylaw.
Councillor
Thanks,
Leafwood,
Chair.
supplemental?
Yes, supplemental. To be honest, in all the years on council, I don't actually remember that delegations were only on about agenda items. I think we had lots of, like when they came and talked about invasive species,
Right.
that wasn't necessarily it. And they wanted council action, that wasn't an agenda item. So, we may not be able to, people come in, they give their delegation. And yes, sometimes it is on the agenda and we do talk about it later, but as long as the public understands if they come and give a delegation, we may not be discussing it at that meeting. It could be a subsequent meeting, but I don't think we should limit it to what's on the agenda.
I think that's where the differentiation between the delegation and presentation was. A presentation could be on anything that they're not asking you for
Yeah.
action. They just want you to have it for information. But the other one, but at the regional district, when the delegations appear, we actually never have an action at the same meeting as the delegation, because that gives staff a chance to take that question that the request that they're asking. It will be in their presentation or their delegation what they're asking, but the actual ask doesn't appear until the next agenda, which gives ample time for staff to do their research. That might be something that we could do, but a presentation, it might be about an agenda item, but not asking you to take action on it. So they just want you to have information, the same as with their question or their information at the beginning of the meeting. They want you to consider this during your deliberations at another time, but they can't do it in 2 minutes, so they want to give a presentation instead. Councillor?
But this is an impossible timeline for a delegation then, because if it's only supposed to be on agenda items, the agenda gets set Tuesday, the noon before, but this says you have to have your information 15 days before.
Your request for the delegation, but you can have
But
your
how do you-
ask. You can have your ask
Right, but
embedded.
if you don't know what's on the agenda, how do you know?
You put it on there. The delegation asks for that item
Oh,
on the agenda. It's part of their delegation package.
okay, I get it.
Yeah, that makes it an agenda item, and then they can present on it at the same meeting.
Okay, I get it.
That's the way I'm interpreting it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, I think a delegation is a capacious enough word that it will accept presentation as well. So delegation, we'll just stick with one word, and which could include something that's on the agenda or something that is not on the agenda, but say is maybe related to something on our strategic plan that somebody would like to have us think about ahead of time, knowing we will be discussing it in a few weeks or months. Yes, to whether to amalgamate presentation with delegation, let's just call it delegations. I think all delegations should give staff 15 days. I think that's fine with me. Like anytime I've been a delegation in the past, yeah, this is something you plan for in 15 days. Totally reasonable to me. It makes it a more serious affair coming in front of council. I think delegations at 10 minutes plus time for questions is fine. 2 delegations max. Not, I've already gone through this, that in my opinion, it doesn't have to be on the current agenda. It's as long as it is something within the purview of council. And the last one, in order to manage time and prevent debate, to add that following the presentation, each council member may speak once upon recognition by the chair for the purpose of asking clarifying questions or making a brief comment. That's kind of the same rules as we were agreeing to in the public input session. And so that seems appropriate to follow through and do the same thing for delegations.
So this method of public input just gives them a longer time frame to make their presentation than the 2 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Essentially.
And
Yeah.
they could also bring in materials,
Yeah.
visual aids and such.
Yeah, and that was part of the deadline for their supporting materials was noon on the Friday, was it?
Correct.
Yeah. That gives staff a chance to amalgamate it with the agenda package. So we're essentially not receiving anything after noon on Friday that becomes a part of the package because staff has to be able to get it put together for both council and the public to review over the weekend. Okay. Did you have anything, Councillor Bring, or?
Through Chair, I'm in lockstep with was said clause by clause. I think that's exactly what my thoughts are as well.
So you're fine with that, Councillor Leaflet?
Yeah, I mean, some of this doesn't seem to make a little, like it says, delegations may be scheduled to present to council when the item is considered on the agenda. But you just said they get put on the agenda by virtue of being the delegation.
No. I think this one was to have them rather than at the beginning of the meeting and then we talk about the agenda item is adjacent to, right? So they put their delegation right before we discuss the agenda item. So that it's not both at the beginning of the
okay.
meeting, so it's.
Right, okay.
That's correct, yeah?
Correct.
So do we then take on the, like the setup of the meeting, do we take delegations out of there then in that? Like when it comes on the meeting?
Through the chair, staff would adjust the agenda. The placeholder for delegations might still be there, but we would also schedule the delegation for with the business item
Okay.
so that they would speak, council would interact, and then they might leave, council would have a discussion, make a decision.
Mhm. Good.
But after their delegation and the questions, then the engagement with the delegate quits, right? It's just council.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How does that sound to Councillors Bird and Brown? That we have that flexibility to do that. So if it's simply a presentation style of delegation, then it could be at the beginning, but if it's related to the agenda item, have it right before so that it's fresh in everybody's minds.
That's great.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Reading and adopting bylaws.
So. Clauses 155 to 157. I'm just gonna pull it up on my computer so I can make sure I can give you some context here. Okay, so 55 to 157 are very closely related to the Community Charter and Local Government Act, which allow council to give 2 or 3 readings to a proposed bylaw at the same council meeting under certain conditions. And so that's all it does. It's basically restate what the Community Charter and Local Government Act allow council to do. And so there was some concerns raised about, I guess, adding those to our bylaw and taking advantage of what the Charter and Local Government Act allow. So I don't know if I can really comment on them. Just had input that they didn't like it.
But perhaps whoever submitted that didn't know what the act and the charter said. So that, Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, Yeah, my difficulty with that was that there was one clause that said we could give 3 readings to a bylaw at the same meeting. And then the next clause said that, that we could adopt the bylaw at the same meeting that we've given 2 or 3 readings to.
Well, that's correct. So the community charter states, in accordance with the Local Government Act, council may adopt a proposed OCP or zoning bylaw at the same meeting at which the plan or bylaw received 3rd reading. It's a special allowance within the regulations.
Okay, so not all three,
Right.
but first and second, which introduces it for discussion and for public input. That triggers public input. You can have third and adoption at the same meeting. You can't have all 4.
Doesn't say you can't have all 4.
Okay,
The legislation does not allow you to have first, second, third, and adoption at the same meeting.
Okay, that was not what I was reading there. Just to be clear, what I was reading is that you are allowed to do 3 readings of a bylaw in a single session. And then a further clause says we can adopt a bylaw after 3rd reading. So in the instance where you're giving 3 readings, you do have a 3rd reading. And according to not both community charter, but according to the Local Government Act, you may adopt a proposed official community plan or zoning bylaw at the same meeting at which the plan or bylaw received 3rd reading. Earlier on, he just said you could give 3 readings. So that's where I'm looking for clarification.
well, and I wonder if the distinction is at the regional district, we can do third and adoption at the same meeting. But not first and second, but they're more 100% governed by local government act, not the community charter. And I wonder if we're melding the two. No, yeah, and
So staff will go back and grab the exact wording from the Local Government Act and insert it into the bylaw
okay,
to make sure there's no confusion.
but what you're saying is we can do first and second and third at one meeting, or just first and second, but never adoption, not all 4 readings at one meeting.
That's what I'm saying, but
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It just needs, I guess, needs clarity
Mhm.
for council's benefit to make sure that we know what's happening. And Councillor Brown.
Up to the chair. Thank you, CAO, for clarifying that. I think if I remember correctly too, at the very beginning of all this, it does state that at any point, if anything that's in this is in contravention to the Local Government Act or the charter, that it would go to that document, not to this document. So I think that is also a backstop.
Yeah.
Should our wordsmithing be imperfect, that it would roll back to the senior legislation.
Yeah, and staff is aware of that. They're not going to introduce something that's not correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're more the subject matter experts than we are. All right. Did that deal with everything in that section, CAO Baker?
yes,
Right.
almost there.
2 more page. No. We turn the page, then there's council correspondence policy at the very back. What's that?
May I go to the bathroom?
Do we,
You can keep going, to be honest. You do not need to wait for me. I'll be right back.
okay.
Already moving.
Yeah, he said to go ahead.
So there was a concern with the written public input policy whereby council could potentially receive the written public input just a couple hours before their Tuesday meeting. And so we could amend the clause so that council gets it earlier. It's difficult. The agenda gets published on the Friday. We're accepting written public input until noon on Monday. we can try to get council the written public input on Monday. But so you have more time to review, but if there's a stat holiday, it's just not going to be possible. And so when we wrote the policy, stating, you know, at the latest 2 hours prior to the meeting, it was kind of to be safe, you know, certainly at noon on Monday, if we're open, staff's going to be eager to pull the package together, prepare it for ourselves as well as give it to council. But like I said, if there's a stat holiday or we're short staffed, then it could be Tuesday. Maybe just a further comment. If council ever receives like far too much input that they can't actually digest it whenever they receive it so that they can make an informed decision at the meeting, well, then we should probably defer that discussion until another meeting. Keeping in mind that when that would be a rare occurrence because when there's major community issues, there's going to be public hearings and open houses and committee meetings that council would have received the input well in advance. I know there's concern there about not having enough time to review it before the meeting. I just don't know. I couldn't imagine you're ever going to be overwhelmed with it. And again, if it is a major issue that we're dealing with, we're not going to give you important information 2 hours before and ask you to make a decision. Just realistically, it's not how we would do it. So staff would recommend that it remain as is, that we have up until 2 hours before the meeting to give council the written public input. Making it Monday, just not going to happen on stats. And if you keep it as is, then I think we just have to monitor it and see how it goes. I know other communities do this. They have more staff resources. Maybe we just do it, see what happens. And if it's not working, we have to pivot. It's just my thoughts.
Yeah, the public just has to understand that we do have physical limitations as members of council at the present time. It would be highly unusual, I think, to have everybody who's available to read all the submissions on the day of, but it depends on what the topic is. And I wonder if Councillor Brown, go ahead.
Through the chair, perhaps also, I mean, granted, I did miss some of the conversation, but I think that if it were to just be known that, that if you want all of council to have an opportunity to be able to read and consider your information, the more time that you give them, the better.
Yeah.
If you are submitting it on the day or within 3 or 4 hours, then a reasonable assumption may be that not all council may have had an opportunity to read that by then. And just highly encourage people, the more time, the better, and the more likely we'll be able to meaningfully interact with your engagement.
Councillor Leawood?
Sure. But they have to get it by Friday at noon, right? And then it's staff that has to give it to us 2 hours before. Isn't that?
No, this is the one that because it's based upon the agenda items.
Right.
So they don't get it until Friday either.
So they're going to be able to give to staff up to 2 hours before the meeting, written input. And then staff is going to have to compile that. Okay.
No, Monday at noon's the deadline.
Okay.
Public
So-
input, and then staff have to pull it together and get it to council no later than. 2
Okay,
hours.
so it's there. Okay. I thought it was Friday, but it is Monday.
So Monday at noon unless it's a staff holiday, but as long as it's in staff's mailbox first Tuesday morning in that case. And with it, because if it's because it would have to be that. Otherwise, staff wouldn't have a chance to compile it, right?
Right.
We'd have to look at date stamps on the emails. Just to, if we're gonna go noon on Monday and it's a staff holiday, how do we? It's the same as what we were just speaking about, having it earlier for council.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe, I think there's a couple of things that have come to mind here for me. So one is that gonna find a way that let's say written public input is being received throughout the week before the agenda is even published. Folks are just saying, hey, I want this as written public input. Okay, great. Staff will find a way to start compiling that and put it somewhere where council can access it as it's coming in. And then once the agenda is issued, over that weekend, all the way through to noon on Monday, there might be a flood of more public input that comes in. So we'll throw that in the exact same place so that as soon as possible, you can go find it. And the place for it is probably going to be on, the document center through Civic Web. So that might help reduce the amount of written public input you get after the agenda.
I wonder, would we allow staff the leeway to not put it in date and time order, but by if it's all to do with one topic where there's, 3 topics that combine the correspondence related to certain topics in one, so we're dealing with Blue Jays, and then we're going to talk about the Vancouver Canucks, and then go back to talking about the Toronto Blue Jays. So everything to do with the Toronto Blue Jays is together, and everything about the Canucks is together, so that you're in a flow sort of, and can see whether, they might be very similar. You're not going to leave anything off, but at least it gives you a bit of a guide. So I had Councillor Leithwood first.
That just seems like it's gonna be more work for staff. I mean, if they're gonna have,
Sure. What's going to happen is somebody's going to send an email in and we're going to download it and save it. And we'll probably name it South Kaslo Development Plan, all of them, and then just put dash in the last person's name. So there's a good chance it's not going to be onerous for us
Okay.
to organize it by topic.
Okay. And Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, my only consideration would be that if we were grouping by topic, that's something that came in earlier, might not be held off while we waited for that topic to fill, or, to have, like, the benefit of having it in time order, which I actually think topic's the best way.
Yeah.
But it ensures that if you send it in, 2.5 weeks in advance or whatever, that we get to then see it at that time, and you have the benefit of knowing we're seeing it then and there. Whereas so maybe I'm misunderstanding. Yeah. So basically, as they come in, they just get numbered and then put with that topic.
But I think, I'll let you talk, but I think I know where you're gonna go.
I'm gonna restate what Robert was just saying. He would normally give a topic. So you're gonna save somebody's correspondence, you're gonna save it as South Beach dash Brown, say. And then it goes into the file. And then the next one is South Beach dash Daisy. It's gonna be the one after. It's all gonna be, so you're gonna see how it's all the dates. And you're gonna see them as they come in naturally. So you open your emails on a Wednesday, you can see all the ones that came in there prior to that. And then as you go along through the week, there's gonna be more coming in, but they'll be naturally grouped by topic by dint of their title.
Great.
But we do have to bear in mind, it's all gonna be last minute, because we're talking about a whole bunch of different things right now, but at the beginning, partway through the meeting, we pivoted that the input that was received after Friday is related to an agenda item. So we're not gonna be getting it
That's right.
over a 2-week period
That's right.
and be loaded as it comes in. It'll all be together. That's why I was suggesting that, is because between Friday agenda cutoff, when public has access to the agenda and can give their input on agenda items, because we did establish that it was the first session was about the written input and verbal input were about agenda items.
Mhm.
So that's where I was going with that grouping, because the staff has the ability to do that then, because it's all going to be populated pretty much at the same time.
Mhm.
Well, that's gonna make it really hard for the public to understand. I mean, I think this is gonna be a really hard. I know that change is inevitable and you have to get used to it, but some of these changes are really gonna be hard for the public to wrap their head around. I think,
And
anyway, let's finish it off.
yeah, I think we'll all get there. We'll all get there. We're offering, we are offering a lot more opportunities for the public to provide input. And, hopefully they'll bear in mind what our discussions were about time limitations for ourselves and for staff and for themselves. That, and to be respectful of everybody's time. And we might not be able to deal with everything. It just that may be a fact. All right. Do you have anything else on that one before we go to the last page?
No, last page it is. So, a couple things to clarify on the council correspondence policy. One is that staff are planning to develop a policy for notice of motion and submissions by council. Just to give you a bit more guidance on how that process would work if you want, as well as a template for submitting correspondence for action. So that would be a bit of a memo outlining what your recommendation is, and maybe attaching to it the original correspondence that you received that triggered your desire to submit it for action. And then there's correspondence. Oh, it's just to make a differentiation here, to make sure we're clear that there's a difference between correspondence and written public input. And I'm not too sure why, but I think there must have been a comment on someone's submission related to this policy. But correspondence is messages addressed to the mayor and council, mail, email, and a web form that we're hoping to put on the website. So you just type in what your feedback is and attach any items. And it's not practical for every email and letter that you receive as a counselor or the mayor to get put on the agenda or made available to the public. So there was some comments about every email you receive being added as to the agenda in some way. And it's just not practical, in part because we'd have to redact hundreds of documents. And that's just not manageable, or even putting hundreds of these documents on the agenda. It's going to make the agenda, potentially over 1,000 pages long. And so correspondence on the agenda must be limited to what's actionable or relevant. We can't put everything you receive on the agenda. So what's up for discussion with this policy would be the time requirement for staff to forward correspondence to the mayor. So if we receive correspondence, a letter in the mail, and we need to give it to the mayor, what's the time frame that staff have to do it in? Right now, the policy doesn't say, but I've made a suggestion in the paper you have here of 48 business hours. Seems reasonable to receive it. Maybe someone's sick, so we do it the next day. So 2 days seemed reasonable.
Through the chair, 48 business hours, you mean two business days. It's 48 business hours, there's 8 hours a week, 8 hours a day.
Yeah, that's 6 days. Yeah.
Thank you.